There we go. Okay, so everyone, hello. Welcome to our first community arts conversation of PACE Center's Month of Service. My name is Liu Chen. I'm the program manager of Trenton Arts at Princeton. And today we are joined by two members of the Trenton Youth Dancers team, faculty fellow Rebecca Stenn, who also teaches at the Lewis Center for the Arts, and teacher partner Elizabeth Zwierzynski, who teaches dance at Trenton Central High School. And so I hope today will be, I hope and know that it'll be a wide-ranging, fascinating, and inspiring conversation, knowing the two amazing people here with us today. And I hope that you have many questions for them, which you can put in the chat during the conversation, and then also elevate either in the chat or over video during the Q&A at the very end. So in terms of the timeline, we're looking at about 30 minutes to 40 minutes of conversation, followed by 15-20 minutes of Q&A. And so with that, I will remove myself from the room and hand it over to Rebecca, who will be facilitating today's conversation. So over to you, Rebecca. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Lou. I mean, really, thank you, Lou. You're amazing, and we so appreciate all that you do. And you know, I feel like I also should recognize and thank a few other people before we start. The Trenton Youth Dance, the entire team has been amazing, and we have some people from that team with us today. And PACE Center for Civic Engagement, thank you for organizing this whole conversation. And Trenton Arts at Princeton, it's been an honor to work with you. And Lou, you're the best. So let's get to it. You know, I'm delighted to be with you, Elizabeth. I admire you, and I'm just so thrilled to have this opportunity to have a conversation with you. And I wanted to start by saying, and you know, we already talked a little, but how are you? And with the aside that I did want to acknowledge for everybody that this is a pretty crazy days/time, and you know, kind of just putting that out there that how are you?
Yes, so thank you for asking, and I appreciate the time to, you know, kind of acknowledge just like, yeah, it feels like we're at the end or the beginning, or we don't know, of just a twilight time in so many aspects. You know, from being separated, I'll share with all of our folks here that Trenton Public Schools, we've been 100% remote up until this point. We're considering returning, or that's the goal, in February to a hybrid schedule. So that's a new challenge. And I think, you know, there are great days and there are beautiful moments of connections with students, but it is entirely exhausting at the same time. And I'm sure there's, you know, all of us can feel that in different ways.
Elizabeth, for those who don't know, will you tell us your role? Like, what, when you say schools, what do you mean?
Sure. So I am the full-time dance educator at Trenton Central High School. We are a comprehensive high school, but within that there are 4 specialized career academies. The Visual and Performing Arts Academy, which is my home, is one of them. And so I have the privilege of being the full-time dance teacher to 10th through 12th graders. And that's the job title. I think the role is much more comprehensive in being a teacher, a mentor, a listener, a friend to my students, who I all love dearly.
How long has this program that you spearhead run? How long has it been going? I mean, tell us.
Sure. So there's, you know, before my time with Trenton Public Schools, there's been some history of having an NDI site, Jacques D'Amboise National Dance Institute, that's run in Trenton for many years. So that's been, in a way, a feeder program for students in the elementary grades and an after-school program in the middle school. But I'm happy to say I'm the first full-time dance educator in the district, and that felt like a big point of pride. So this is my 7th year in this role.
Well, so now I'm really curious, how did you find your way to this position? You know, tell us a little bit about your past and your story.
Sure. A little origin story. So I received my formal dance training, my Bachelor in Fine Arts at Mason Gross School of the Arts. And so, the goal was performance first when I started. And the graduate dance education program was just being formed when I was a student there, and had begun to take some of the dance education courses and was really hooked. Dance in the public school context was not something that I was familiar with. At that time I knew there were vocational programs, but not kind of in this sense that this can and should be part of a comprehensive curriculum in the public schools. So really through my dear mentor, Barbara Bashaw, who is now at Teachers College, did I kind of open my horizons to dance education. And I think, a little plug or some things that really matter to me are that I think my place in the public school is to really radically reimagine what dance education is, and that it doesn't need to be a conservatory-based training that is really centered around fear and hierarchy. And I think a big part of what I enjoy teaching is facilitating space for students to make work and make dances. And I think especially in their adolescence, that's really, really important and exciting to me to allow art making to be parallel with their identity formation.
Wow. So wait, I wasn't going to get so into the nitty gritty, but I'm really curious now.
We're here.
When you say reimagining dance education in a public school setting, can you get more detailed with what that means? I mean, I'm hooked.
Sure. So, I think the challenge is always realigning to what that means. I think, I don't know, dare I say, it shouldn't or it doesn't matter to me about my students' aspirations in professionalizing. I think, both in dance culture and in educational culture, we evaluate the value of a program based on whether students are professionalizing, what are these accolades? And I think while we are a career and tech ed program, and this can be a pathway for students to professionalize if they wish, that's not what's most important. It's about celebrating our bodies. It's about moving our bodies. It's about celebrating our community and our identities. And so I think that can happen in really small ways, and just trying to learn who your students are, and giving them a voice.
I couldn't agree more. I'd love to hear more about your students. You are a high school teacher. You teach 10th through 12th grade. Will you tell us a little bit about your students?
Yeah, they're really cool human beings. So yeah, what do you want to, I was going to say, what do you want to know, or where,
I guess what I'm curious about is, was there a particular draw for you for high school? Mm-hmm. And then also, just sort of, I think, how does dance play into their lives, these students?
Well, I think for a lot of kids, I have some who have danced before and some who have not. And trying to level the playing field that this isn't seen as a have not. I really like teenagers, and I think they're rebellious, and I like that, and I try to accept that and not say no to a lot of things, and that's what's exciting. I think that's what's exciting about art making with them. And yeah, I also think that being a teenager is incredibly hard, and in the most holistic way. I want to be a really good dance teacher, but I want to be a really good teacher, and a teacher who shows up and listens and is just feels like you have a personal connection with every student. And I can't say that I've had that in my high school experience. And I just wonder, you know, what is that like for students to feel like they go through a day and are, you know, don't get a chance to personally connect with someone. And so I didn't realize that I had these thoughts about the holistic role of a teacher until I came to Trenton and realized I think that's, I think my conception of what a teacher does has shifted. You're not a content holder, you're a facilitator and you're a community maker, and that's really cool.
And let me ask this, I'm way off my whole list of questions here, but
yeah, that happens, right?
You know, what happened in the last few months apropos of what you just said?
I think that we're able to maintain that sense of community, and I'm really proud of that. You know, this can probably tie into one of your initial thoughts, but I'm seeing that there's a trend where attendance is really challenging, and that's for a variety of reasons. That's you know, sometimes it's tech, sometimes it's childcare. So that's been difficult to adjust to. I think, you know, we don't have a perfect solution, but I value my persistence, and I, you know, can at least say if I'm not seeing kids that there's always an attempt to personally reach out to them, whether that's, you know, through our assessments, through our class messaging. So, you know, that's both a value and a challenge during this time.
So yes, I'm in a minute, I'm gonna look at some of the questions because they're about what we're talking about. And while I do that, I'm gonna ask you one other thing, just to elaborate a bit. You know, this idea of allowing a student to find a voice. And I guess I'm curious about what, you know, actual, even if you will, lessons or exercises do you offer up to encourage this? Is your classroom one that has a lot of making opportunity?
Yes. So making, yes. And I think, you know, there's across the 3-year arc of our program, one of the largest culminating projects is that our students write and submit proposals for a dance work to make on their peers. And so with some of my middle school colleagues, we've created a nice little adjudication panel, and they help me because it's very challenging to select you know, just on the logistical side of things, who is making work that year. And so, you know, I've now thought about planning backwards from that, about what are the skills that students need to be able to make informed choices. And so how are we showcasing different artists to say, here are artists who are working with a strong artistic intention to showcase their work. How are we using the elements of Laban movement analysis to prove our artistic intention? And so that's the end, the big goal in senior years for them to create this work. But also I think just dance making that I do with them should be inherently collaborative all the time. And so even in the context of a technique class, right? Here's the framework that we're working in today. Here's the phrase, fill in the end, fill in the beginning, fill in the middle. And so that's the most, I think, simple and tangible response to sort of shift the ownership, you know, and the power orientation in the classroom too. You know, and I think when you think about a high school student schedule, it's incredibly teacher directed. And so that shift is so needed. That break, that hour in the day.
Right. You know, that kind of is an interesting segue. I mean, asking, you know, about what does your classroom look like? How many students? Are you in a big dance studio? Give us a visual.
Okay, right. So the true where, what, when. So right now that looks like the tiny, maybe 4x6 dance space of my bedroom. And, you know, we're dancing in kitchens, we're dancing in living rooms and laundry rooms, in whatever room and whatever space we have. And so that's been a, a mindset shift for our students to be like, yes, I really see you and I hear you, and that we only have a 2x2 square space, but we're still dancing in that way. And so that has felt successful. And normally we have a gorgeous studio. Trenton Central High School was, we were lucky to be a school development authority site. So our high school was rebuilt 2 years ago. Well, this would have been our second year in the building. I don't know if we can really even count last year because we haven't had a full year in there. So I'm very blessed to have that space. And we have both a black box theater and a full auditorium at our school.
Amazing. And another question about your students is, how are they accepted into the program?
They just choose to accept themselves in the program. So as long as there are spots, which there are, students can elect to be in our program. So as of right now, we are not audition based. There are thoughts about whether we want to move there or not. But students can entirely select to say, yes, I'd like to be in the dance pathway.
I love it. I'm all for that idea of inclusivity. It just feels terrific. So let's shift a little now, not entirely, but a little, to talking about some of the work that encompasses Trenton Youth Dance.
Yeah. Yes.
We work with our Princeton alumni and current students and talk about that community kind of growing and churning and connecting.
Right. So, really this began with a conversation with Lou. So I'd love to really acknowledge and give some credit in that direction where it's due. Because, sometimes we're so desperately seeking out partnerships, and sometimes things just really organically fall in your lap. And I'm so really blessed that happened. So I understand and I know that Trenton Youth Orchestra had been running for a few years prior. And so it's really a credit to Lou's vision to say, yes, let's expand this to all 4 art forums. And what a gift it's been to have someone, who said, all right, well, now what does a partnership look like in dance? And so in our early conversation, I expressed really the interest to have a Saturday program. I think one of our big challenges is continuity. And for students who wish to professionalize or not, that there is not always a space for them to take dance outside of school. And while I treasure our hour and 20 minutes or hour as it is currently, that's just not enough time to have an entire dance experience. And so we know that students could have so much more access to private sector dance education. And this has been a really great place to start filling in those gaps. Mm-hmm. And so the Saturday program is 2 years old now. It's been wonderful working with Rachel this last year in her role as director. And also with Sophie Blue, who is our student director. And so it's been really nice to see that program evolve, and also their visions for what dance is and what is important to the adolescent dancer as well.
Wonderful. And it's also, from the point of view, from my perspective, right, having the ability to have my students, fan out into the world and have real-time experiences, it's really delightful. So it's been a mutually beneficial experience. So let's see, I think I'd love to sort of hear about just you personally, your work, in this realm. What are some of the challenges, if you could identify, and then conversely, what are some of, and you can start with whichever you want, but what are some of the really rewarding moments? What has really moved you in this work? I'm interested to hear both sides.
So we'll get the challenges out of the way, and we'll start with this year in in saying, you know, we have needed to shift to remote learning. And at first I was really scared about that. And now it seems not so scary. We've been doing that for, you know, these first few months of the school year. We're embarking on trying to figure out how and if we can return to hybrid instruction. And so, you know, I know as we were talking earlier, that seems really scary to me, in the fact that I can't quite yet figure out how that will function with having students in front of me and students on a screen and through Zoom, and how to be flexible if we need to switch back to remote instruction. So that's where my head's at right now. I think if we weren't in a COVID year, I think some of the challenges are just really trying to understand what students' prior assumptions are of dance, because there's a lot of them, right? There's a lot of gendered assumptions. There's a lot of cultural assumptions about like, what do we do here and who's valued in this space and whose dance are we doing? And, you know, I think there's a lot of self-reflection that is happening presently and should always be happening about what pioneers are we celebrating? What dance styles are we celebrating? And so a lot of that is unlearning as well, right? I'm a conservatory trained dancer. I studied white dance forms. And so what does that mean?
Are these conversations you have with your students?
Yes. In some parts, yes. I mean, not as in depth as like, I'm like, all right, I got to figure out like, what am I unlearning here? But certainly in broadening the canon of who we celebrate as dance pioneers.
Right, and what that canon means, like even just to begin with. Yeah.
Right,
That's
right.
really interesting. Okay, tell us about the good stuff.
And the good stuff, there's so much good stuff. The good stuff is watching you know, I have the privilege, I'll say this, which I don't think all high school teachers do, and it's a challenge too, of seeing my students as a cohort for 3 years. So they're in 2 separate cohorts when they're in their 10th grade year, but then they merge together in their junior and senior year. And the beautiful thing is watching that community evolve, and that's a bumpy process of figuring out how we collaborate and work together and value each other from very different places and skill levels and levels of experience and strengths and intelligences. So community is definitely one of them. I really love watching students just have pride and ownership of their work, you know, kind of echoing back to assumptions. There are lots of assumptions about dance not being academically rigorous. I know that we're together with like friends and artists and dancers. So we know that not to be true, but I think that's great, a great learning curve for them to realize, you know, how much is expected of them to be an owner and a leader of a project and a collaborator, and all of those great 21st century skills for, you know, my ed friends who love to hear that.
You know, I wasn't even going to go here, but you just said something I want to ask about. You said, you know, we all know, we're sort of all in the know here, you know.
Yeah, we've got it.
We know why, you know, dance is so fabulous and great. But have you had to explain, sort of defend, have you had to have these conversations with your administration? And if so, tell us.
So, you know, I'll start by saying I was hired by a wonderful, wonderful arts-focused administrator. And so a lot of the credit of the creation of my role goes to Adrienne Hill, who is now the principal at one of our middle schools in the district. And so, you know, credit to her for having the vision to say, yes, I need to have a comprehensive arts education. And I was really, really lucky within my first year to be working under someone who said, yes, I know, and I value this, and I know. Mm-hmm. I think, you know, we have a lot of administrative changes in Trenton. It's very fluid. So I know that there are assumptions about what rigor is, or like what technique and training is. And so undoing that and giving students the freedom to make choices and be leaders of their learning has been a shift that sometimes I have to defend, right? To say like, oh no, we can't let the students just think that they're in charge of everything. Well, they absolutely are.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, it's just a philosophical approach that isn't always understood in other realms, you know, outside of the arts. But for the most part, you've had, it sounds like a pretty good experience.
Yeah, I would consider myself very lucky.
Very lucky. And your students are very lucky. You know, I mean, this is, it's just not, it's not everywhere. We all know this, but it's not everywhere that it's so easy to convince the powers that be to allot time, you know,
Right.
in the amount of time that you have, you know, with your students. So, all right. So let me ask you this, Elizabeth, what are your hopes and dreams for, you know, moving forward with this work that you're doing? I mean, that's a broad question.
No, but it's a great question. Yeah, hopes and dreams, hopes and dreams. Always to serve my students first. And gosh, that sounds like such an open-ended question, but I think we need to remind ourselves as educators to always be grounded in serving the needs of our students, their emotional needs, their social needs, their physical needs. So there's that. And yeah, so much about, there's so much else, right? There's paperwork, there's evaluations, there's assessment. And so I always try to reframe those duties as ways to continue to serve my students. My other big hopes and dreams, and this is tangible, and I'm going to speak it out to all of you, is that I really believe dance education for every child, every school, every grade. My tangible goal within Trenton is that by the time I leave, and hopefully sooner, that there is a full-time dance educator to service every child in Trenton. A big accomplishment is that we have 3 middle school dance educators now. And so that's recently evolved in the last 2 to 3 years. And I'm so proud. I'll name these colleagues out to you as well. So we have Emily Funicello, who is working at Dunn Middle School. And then we have 2 dance educators at Hedgepath Williams Middle School for the Arts, Anthony De Leon and Christina Trotwine. And they are all dear collaborators and colleagues of mine. So I want to celebrate them and make sure that we are eventually infiltrating the elementary schools. So yeah, I have to find the buy-in, find the power, find the money, fix the budget, right? But I really do believe that there should be comprehensive arts education for all of our students in Trenton. And I hope that for every child.
Amazing. I mean, is this something that you think is going on in other parts of New Jersey, or I mean, is this particular to Trenton, or?
Yes, so there's, you know, certainly some amazing dance education colleagues in New Jersey. And so I've come to know and work with them through Dance New Jersey, which is the state affiliate of the National Dance Education Organization. And so we're a tight-knit community, but I also think that the presence of certification programs in the state of New Jersey are really important. And so, you know, you need a place that is training and generating teachers to, you know, create that cyclical nature of, I hate to say it so objectively, like supply and demand, or, but that, yeah.
That's what it is, yeah.
Yeah, right. We need trained educators, and then they need to be working and doing the work in the schools.
Right.
So.
Oh, sorry. Were you gonna continue on?
So those are the big goals for now. I'll also share that I have really enjoyed mentoring. I had a student teacher this fall, so that's been a really nice process to, you know, have someone be in the classroom with me and watch their growth as teachers, as a teacher. So I hope I can continue that work in the future.
Well, that seems to me to be just of paramount importance. The idea of mentoring someone in your class, hands-on with your students. Do you know, I mean, I've that's been my kind of philosophy when I teach pedagogy. You have to be,
Mm-hmm.
you know, you have to be in a room with students to learn how to say, huh, that's student-directed learning. A student just asked me a question and we're going to throw out everything we were going to do and peer into that, you know, so that's exciting. Listen, I think this is an interesting question in the chat. I've just been messaged here. So this question has, you know, a lot of particularities, but again, it's about sort of visualizing you in a room with students here. I'm going to read the whole question to you and you can sort of find your way through. So how do your young students know they want to focus on dance? And then how much time do they get to spend on dance a week? Can they take non-focus classes? Do students have an expectation of learning some kind of steps? I mean, and how do you handle that? You mentioned that a little bit, this idea of assumptions and expectations about certain kinds of.
Yeah, so remind me, what was the first one though? I don't want to miss that.
How do your young students know they want to focus on dance? Like, have they danced previously? Like, tell us about that.
Yeah, so some have and many have not. And so, you know, it's kind of been when the program started, by chance, oh, I heard about it, I've seen it model. And at that point, before we were brought back together, I was hired in 2014. So while Trenton Central High School was being rebuilt, we were in different swing spaces. So it was a little bit easier to make a lot of noise, actually literally, because our classrooms were not so soundproofed. It was a converted studio. And kind of student engagement and joy really helped to develop that program. And so that's, I think, how students know. It's, you know, I think our chain of recruitment or exposure could always be improved. We have a separate 9th grade academy. So, you know, I've been having a conversation with Lou and Rachel about how we can better engage that population, because it's still, I think there are some gaps there about, you know, you either are hearing about it or you're not. But I think, you know, performances are a great way to spread awareness about our program, as we know as artists. And students just elect to be in the program from there. Yeah. Right? And so I have a lot of kids who are like, well, I've always wanted to take a dance class, so now I'm here. And that's a great place to start. Yeah.
In addition to their Saturday work, which we're going to talk about a little bit more, because we've just had a question about that. What about during the week?
So during the week, so it looks a little bit different for each of our cohorts and our levels, but we do study the codified styles of ballet, modern, and jazz. I try to really consciously program my guest artist work in areas of dance that I am not expert in. So in the past, we've had a West African dance guest artist, b-boy guest artist, and we'll talk about how TYD has been really a critical part, or we'll talk about it now, in filling in that gap. So what I loved when I was first collaborating with Sophie is she's like, yes, let's broaden our definition of dance and dance through different cultures. And that's been a really unique part of our partnership with Princeton, is that the student dance companies have been integral in helping expose our students to many different dance forms. And so I love this model that we've developed of having a student dance group come in to perform or teach or be in, you know, some combination of the both, and then have a workshop after that. So that's been a beautiful extension curricularly of what is not possible during the school day, right? I couldn't possibly program 10 different guest artists in a school year. And so that's just really opened and been a wonderful complement.
And just for those people listening who are not exactly clear about, I'm going to just explain a little bit what you said. So Sophie is a Trenton Youth Dance Fellow, former student of mine, and she really, I think, actually kind of spearheaded this idea of the student dance companies. I mean, it's a brilliant idea. So for those of you who are listening, Princeton has, oh gosh, I don't know how many, maybe somebody could help me, but many student dance companies in a broad range of genres, and also very multicultural as well. And so Sophie, I think, proposed this idea that on Saturdays, she would bring in each Saturday a different Princeton student dance company to Elizabeth students. There would be a master class, and then there would be a making workshop. So, sorry, Elizabeth, I didn't really need to say all that probably, but just so that people understand, I mean, that really is the crux of the sort of collaboration between Trenton Youth Dance and your students.
Right. So in answering that, I think I haven't quite answered all of the other questions that you had. Did I miss a few?
We could talk for a moment about this idea about dealing with expectations from students who come in saying, are we going to learn XYZ, and how do you.
Yeah, so a lot of the questions are we going to learn all that ballet stuff? And I'm like, yes, or I think I've coined the, that codified dance forms are commonly misinterpreted as everything ballet. And so that takes a bit of work to break down. But then I think there's also expectations, and we're informed by, potentially a prior experience or by the media, right? Like Dance Moms has been such, I'll say it, a very negative thing. And so it's like, well, are you going to yell at us? And like, are we going to do the splits? And are we going to hold, like, are we going to perform these torture-like exercises? And yeah, dance is physically rigorous, but not in that way. So I think, there's that expectation of like, well, like, why aren't you yelling at us? Well, I don't think we'll be doing that here today or ever. So I think that takes a while to reframe, like what is rigor, and what is demand, and what is holding yourself accountable to something without being scared into doing it, or to be afraid, or for an environment to be threat or fear-based.
Exactly. I want to return to something that you mentioned, this idea of mentoring, because you mentioned it with regards to your student teacher. But I think that you also encourage mentoring within your students. Is that true?
Yes. So, there's been more continuity in that, and not. So before we were, just a little bit of history, technically our program at Trenton Central High School is considered a career technical education program. So that comes with this sequential pathway in dance, and also some accreditation where we are monitored by the New Jersey Department of Education, and, get some lovely funding tied to this career and tech ed exposure as well. And so that's been nice to create this very continuous and sequential 3-year program. Prior to us being a career tech ed program, it could be an elective where students pop in for a semester and pop out. And that was lovely because there was cross grade students in different grades in our various levels. And so now, just by nature of scheduling, that hasn't happened. So I do miss that element. But within our program, I really, at least when we're physically in the space, and I say, it doesn't feel as true this year, to have our students, our seniors especially, meet and welcome in our 10th graders, and kind of just let them have a really informal Q&A about what dance is and what the expectations are, because it's much, it's it's one thing for me to say that as a teacher, but it's an entirely different thing for students and their peers to have lived that. You know, and that is reciprocal too when our Trenton students come and interact with college students at Princeton. It's like the best thing for them. Yeah, so I think, you know, I try to think about just creating really positive social scenarios for our students across grades as well. And then that makes things like producing a show a whole lot easier too when they're not meeting each other for the first time at Tech Week.
Well, I mean, talk about building a community. It sounds like, you know, you're building a community within a community here, you know, like you're
right.
that sort of sense of just being, you know, there for each other.
Right. You know, and and back to your initial question, I also think I've realized a really important role is just to, I kind of feel like an academic advisor to my students, and no one asked me to, you know, take on that role. They certainly have their guidance counselor and many other support staff at our school who are lovely. But I do feel kind of like Mama Bear, especially with my 10th graders, where we have a lot of conversations about how to build relationships with their other teachers. Because I don't see that piece happening, or like, you know, I think I'm in a unique situation, and our other art specialist as well, to be able to track them through their 3 years. And also, you know, there's the very real reality, like you can't fail your academic classes or you just won't have room for your arts elective on your schedule. And so that feels like a piece of buy-in, but really trying to, you know, just be the reminder to say like, hey, we need to be checking in about this grade. We need to talk about these trends that I see with your attendance. Like, how are you in my class and not here? And so I'm trying to systematize that a little bit more. But I think just the nature of being such a big school, sometimes we don't realize that problems are emerging with students as soon as they should be. And so I think that's our role as teachers.
I agree wholeheartedly, and, you know, just wish more people were like you. But anyway. So listen, I think, Lou, is this around the time when you would like us to open up to questions from everybody who's participating?
Yes.
Yes? Okay.
That's perfect. Yeah, so feel free to submit your questions in the chat, or if you want to unmute yourself and ask your question aloud, I'll bring you into the spotlight video setting.
Yeah, that's nice. I'd love to, I mean, if people want to just kind of speak up, that would be lovely. We can have kind of a open conversation. Oh, but then it's Zoom, right? So we have to be quiet while we wait for people to.
I'm curious how the participation has been as you've gone from, you know, because you did this in person before you did it in remote, and we've been doing the theater program, but we started remote, and I'm curious about how participation has shifted for the students. Like, how many of them are able to sort of keep the focus on it, or how's that going?
Yeah, so I'll invite Rachel, who's with us today, to, you know, feel free to chime in anytime, but we've certainly seen an adjustment. I was so proud last year when we started to kind of like max out our enrollment to the point where I was like, Lou, can we accommodate 20 kids? Like, you know, we've got a lot of interest. And so the numbers have certainly been much smaller this year. And I think that stems from a lot of challenges, and just kids are like so zoomed out, and they're tired of, I think, being like asked to be places, and and that's no reflection of the program, right? Like, it's such a beautiful community and the kids are so excited when they come back. But yeah, Rachel, I see. Yeah,
participation and attendance was definitely the biggest challenge this semester. And you know, I got into pretty regular text correspondence with most of the students who expressed interest in the program, and there were a lot of different factors that could play in. You know, not being in their regular location, meaning they didn't have Wi-Fi access that was as solid, having to take care of younger siblings. One of our students who ended up being an awesome participant, like would have her younger brother like hanging on her body while she was demonstrating the choreography that she'd come up with, which was amazing, such a trooper. And also having jobs. In addition to like extracurricular dance activities that would sometimes conflict. I think a lot of students are this past semester and in these, economically challenging times we're taking on additional work. And especially, competing with these other things when you're offering something exciting in person, where there's food and you're coming into these beautiful dance studios, it's harder to compete with an offer via Zoom. But we did get to form some close relationships and have a solid core of maybe 3 students who were always there, and then a few more who would come in and out. Mm-hmm. So yeah, attendance is an ongoing thing. I think that all of the Saturday morning arts programs we're dealing with, in our weekly meetings with Gloria and Victoria, who are both so incredible. All of us were struggling in that area, but Elizabeth was so amazing at checking in with students and staying in touch about it and figuring out what students, what's going on with students. That was one thing I really valued about our partnership was when I would go through the roster and we'd talk specifically about what might be happening with the student and whether we should stop haranguing them with all of these emails and text messages, or if, and in almost every case, it's been like worth it to keep on including them and keep on opening this opportunity. Mm-hmm. I've had multiple students, thank me for the kindness of, thank you so much for being so kind, and like I feel like they felt like they were in trouble for not coming, and we've tried to keep a really open atmosphere of you're always welcome. It doesn't matter if it's your first time, if you missed the last 8 weeks, you're always welcome.
I see that Faith has a question. Can I just say one thing, Faith, before you dive in? Rachel and I had a lot of conversations about this very subject, and I've thought about it with regards to my classes as well. I mean, this is a bizarre sort of opportunity in a way. Those 3 students that you mentioned, whoa, what an opportunity for them. Do you know what I mean? So we talked about the idea of it's not quantity, it's quality. We're gonna, when we've got those 3 students, they can change the world type thing. So, I think that's an important thing for all of us struggling with this. Faith, what's your question?
Hi, yes, I'm unmuted. First of all, I'm so happy to be here because this is so relevant for me, and I wasn't sure if it would be, but I know Rebecca very well from many years, but I'm currently in the dance education program at NYU, in my entering my final semester, and I just finished student teaching at Frank Sinatra Performing Arts High School for the last semester, which was a fascinating experience to do remotely. And it was very rich and very, it was such a learning experience. And also everything that everyone here has been talking about has been happening. And I guess I wanted to ask the specific question because this is something I experienced as both a teacher and I was able to choreograph on them as well for a winter concert. And I also, as a student, was choreographing minimally in school as a grad student. How did as a dance making program, how did their dance making change virtually? Were there any surprises? Were there any cool things that happened because of this stage that we're now in? And did they explore things that they hadn't before? I found myself doing things specifically. I was doing sign language and tutting and things that were relevant to the space, as well as trying to do bigger movement. But I'm really curious what happened in your program.
Yeah, so great question. In the spring, when we first went remote and we were instruction was asynchronous at that point, which was kind of, I thought it would be okay, and it was really horrible, to be honest. Like, the students need a routine and we need a schedule, and like I need to see them, and I think they need to see us too. But I've never done or haven't had the opportunity yet to do a site-specific project, and that was super fun, right? To get them to embrace a new space in their home and relate to something that, is your dance partner. So that was fun to do. We've certainly played with proximity to the camera, right? There's so many fun dance film things that we can do. So that's been just a part of this fall. But I also, had made some assumptions in the spring about not teaching technique, or like not having the ritual of having a movement class. And I think that was a little flawed because, I'm surprised about how much big dancing we can do in tiny spaces. And I think the students have proved that to themselves as well. And like, it feels really great to move and be expressive. And so that was a piece that was missing in the spring that, I'm realizing that a lot more is possible with physically a lot less as well. And so, yeah, it doesn't all have to be gestural. I think, I've realized that there's so much more full body expressivity that can happen. And that's been really freeing, actually.
And perhaps made us all think a little bit differently about teaching technique classes.
Yeah.
Like something that I've discovered is, how can I teach technique? I mean, a question I keep asking myself, and have students not have to be glued to their screen? Can I, with my directives, allow a student to face away from the screen, but still be engaged in something that's skill building, i.e. technical? And that's been interesting too, to think through, sort of verbal directives and how does that work? So.
Right. Or also like the beauty of, a colleague shared this with me. She's like, yeah, I pre-record my explorations, my improvisations, just so that the students can hear me and that I'm not balancing, like competing on whatever the weird audio mixing that Zoom does. And I was like, yeah, that's genius. And so it takes a bit of mindfulness to really be like, okay, let me prepare this ahead of time. And certainly there are some takeaways about not being able to instantly verbally respond, where you're like, yes, let's observe what's happening here. So, there's more of a script to that, but that's been useful. And then that allows me to like actually see and not just be I don't know, kind of worried about executing these directions. So that's been a little tip and trick that I've been enjoying. Oh, sorry, Rebecca, I'm going to interrupt you. And so Rachel, you're so sweet. She posted in the chat, there's a link. We have been doing some virtual performances. And so really that's a huge credit to my student teacher, where she likes editing video. And I don't really have any expertise in that area. So she helped both create and structure a Halloween performance. So that's one of the traditions of our dance department. This started in my first year, where we would reproduce Thriller and make that like a little touring, dance pop-up in our very small building at the time. And so that's grown to change over the years to give students more ownership in selecting the theme. And my dear theater colleague, Felicia Brown, who works at our high school, our students collaborated last year in that production. They did a wonderful immersive theater haunted back of the stage, and then there was a dance performance connected to that. And actually, I should say that happened for 2 years, both in our high school presently and in our former space. So there has been some adaptations of these kind of physical traditions to the virtual space. And, so it's different, and I'm realizing it's much more time consuming than just producing something that then lives on the stage. But I didn't want the students to feel like they were losing out on those community experiences. So I'm sorry to jump in there, Rebecca, but
Not at all.
for
Actually,
highlighting that. Yeah.
really important. I mean, really, I don't know if we have any, I think we have time for maybe one more question. And if anybody has one, dive in. Okay. Yes. Go
I'll
ahead.
just say, I find this so moving. When I went to high school, there was no dance in my high school. You know, there's nothing, I mean, this is just amazing that you sound like such an amazing teacher, and that your students are getting this, you know, and I loved what you said about making while they're forming their identity. I think it's such an amazing opportunity for them. I just find it very inspiring. So I've really enjoyed hearing what you're offering their students, and I share your vision.
Yes. Well, hi, it's really nice to meet you, Susan. And thank you so much for your praise. I hear that, and it's so thank you, you know, because we don't always get to celebrate teaching in this way. So that, thank you for sharing that. That's really kind.
Yes, I agree with Susan. People are writing in the chat. Exactly. Agreed. And you know what? I think that's a beautiful way to close our conversation. And yes, to celebrate all that you do, Elizabeth. Really, just it's a joy to be involved.
Well,
turn it over.
really, you know, it's celebrating all that we do. You know, not not an I, a we.
Nice, Lou.
Yes, well, I'll just close it out real fast. But first of all, thank you so much, Rebecca and Elizabeth, for coming today and just sharing your expertise and wisdom and advice, particularly in light of all that's happened these last few months. And so thank you so much. And thanks as well to Rachel for popping in there as an impromptu panelist. I really appreciate it. So if you want to hear more about TCHS Dance and TAP, you can follow Elizabeth's program at Dance TCHS on Instagram and TAP at Trenton Arts of Princeton on Facebook and Instagram. And then our next community arts conversation will be next Thursday at 5 p.m. This one will be about theater, and will feature faculty fellow for Trenton Youth Theater, Jane Cox, who is here and asked a question, as well as teacher partner Felicia Brown, whom Elizabeth mentioned and is also here today. So I hope to see some of you there, and we'll go ahead and submit that information in the chat right now. But with that, thank you all for coming. Happy New Year. May 2021 bring us all back together again in person, and have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you so much. Stay safe and sane. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, Elizabeth. Thank you so much.
Yes, bye. Thank you.
I'm gonna like text or email you about maybe if you have time to meet next week or so. I have a percolating idea I wanted to run by you before I took it any further. So I'll be in touch.
Okay, great. Can I say later in the week would be a little bit better? I'm getting very apprehensive, but I'll be in the school Monday and Tuesday.
Oh, I mean,
So,
whenever you're free, I'll
yeah.
literally whenever you're free, I'll work around it, because
Great.
this month is a lot crazier for you than for me. So yes, let me know.
Okay. All right. Great. Well, thank you so much. This has been fun.
Thank you, Elizabeth. That was
Elizabeth. Thank you.
awesome.
Thank you.
Everyone.
Bye.